The first reviews for Final Fantasy XVI are starting to come out, and they are overwhelmingly positive, praising the incredible combat, the insane graphics, and the very interestingly different story. But I want to take a look at that. Let me just say heads up, I'm currently working on my own review for the game itself. I am playing Final Fantasy XVI, but to be quite honest, the game is massive. I don't even know how deep into the game I am right now because it just goes on and on and on and on. But I am going to be having a review of impression style stuff up tomorrow, and then like a big in-depth review when I've fully beaten the game and platinumed it. But let's talk about that Metacritic. What's up, gamers? Dreamcastguy here. Hi, hope you're having a great day. If you could like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. So we're actually over here starting off on Twitter to check out some teeny tiny blurbs. Final Fantasy XVI, as you can see, is getting a lot of 9s and 10s with a couple like 6s and stuff in there that are really dragging down the overall Metacritic score. Now, I decided to pull up that 6 out of 10 here, which is technically what you consider a 3 out of 5, because that's definitely the shocking outlier. But this is on OpenCritic. Look at that. 96% of critics recommend it. So basically everybody except Eurogamer. 90% is the overall average score. A lot of people are really saying that it looks just insane. Final Fantasy XVI's action and scale moved me to tears. The fights make Avengers Endgame look like a Walmart brawl. That is an insanely positive quote that I absolutely want to get tattooed on my face. The story falls short of greatness, but it's all written well and with coherence. Tim Geddes, this guy is over here on kindafunny.com. Now, I feel like Kinda Funny skews pretty positive in general. If they like a game, they really like it, and if they hate it, they really hate it. People are not ready for how good Final Fantasy XVI is. Not only is it one of the best in the franchise, it's one of the best video games I've ever played. The story, the combat, the production value, the vision. It simply doesn't get better than this. They did it. Now, you can't deny that is an extremely happy bit of news. I mean, a lot of us have been curious because Final Fantasy XVI is a big departure. While we've had action-focused Final Fantasies in the past, especially some of the spin-off ones, this is a big shift towards going full-blown insanity. I mean, the fact that it actually has really crazy epic combos and elemental types and stance swapping. The combat is designed by the guy who did a lot of the fighting in Devil May Cry. That's the combat designer. And it seems like, honestly, that's the thing that works best is, hey, you hired one of the most creative geniuses for fight systems. You're going to end up with some pretty good fights. Now, Polygon also seems to have a lot of gripes with the story itself. Some people are saying it's downright terrible. Let's actually take a look at that extremely negative Eurogamer review, though, shall we? Okay. Final Fantasy XVI, easy to like, hard to adore. Man, look at that. Ooh, 3 out of 5 stars. This poor guy is probably going to get a lot of really mean tweets. Edwin, I salute you, sir. You're about to have a rough week. A smart combat system is strained under the weight of a characterful and ponderous pseudo-medieval soap opera with some of the grandest bosses and dullest side quests in Final Fantasy history. Now, as a person who has already put in quite a few hours, yeah, the side quests are all just fetch quests. Every single quest in this game so far that is not main story relevant is usually go kill this guy, go pick a flower, bring it back. I mean, it's extremely basic. A lot of the lore in this game, I think, is good. Not quite as deep as some of the side quests of other Final Fantasy games. Like, I feel like Final Fantasy 15 actually has better, deeper side quests than this, which is strange because that's got, like, kind of weird side quests where you're just trying to fix up cars and stuff. But, here we go. The Final Fantasy games are so called that because the very first installment was to be Square's swan song, their last release before going bankrupt. Another way of explaining that triumphantly iconic title is that reaching Final Fantasy is about journeying into the shadow of the Final Fantasy, the apocalypse. In being stories about saving the world, each game also asks you to spend untold hours living with the prospect of its demise. They all explore how people buckle or find themselves when they're obliged to exist in a climate of pervasive anxiety. Now, that's part of why I absolutely love Final Fantasy. It's my favorite game series of all time. It's why I play even the bad, random, weird ones like Chocobo Racing and stuff like that. Is they have a very unique vibe that to me it's very addictive, to be honest. It's great that they've managed to instill that even now, 35 years after the series originally started. Now, I want to jump down here when he starts to talk about the story a bit, because this is totally spoiler-free. You're not going to get anything past, what the demo originally covered, but he really begins to highlight what's wrong with the story, at least from his point of view, and to some degree, I kind of agree with it. Clive and Joshua's story begins in an ignoble border skirmish for control of a mother crystal, a mountain-sized gemstone whose fragments confer magical powers, the latest of Final Fantasy's metaphor for fossil fuel. But their tale soon spills over to encompass the entire realm of Valisthea, a quasi-medieval continent threatened in one hand by warring dynasties and their dominance, and on the other, by a spreading blight that renders the earth unlivable. Now, obviously, big callbacks right there to Final Fantasy IX and Final Fantasy IV, which I love a lot. As in many Final Fantasies, this world's apocalypse is entangled by a goofy rendition of systematic injustices. People able to cast magic without using crystals are often feared and envied. They're branded at birth as bearers and treated as slaves. Also, in many Final Fantasies, there's a larger metaphorical menace waiting in the wings. It falls to grim and muscle-bound Clive, voiced by the star of Survivor Ben Starr off of Survivor, channeling Christian Bale's Batman to make sense of the madness, one fetch quest at a time. I really like Ben Starr in the game so far. I think he is a very good main character. He's got a good main character vibe. But yeah, sometimes his voice gets a little bit too gruff. Sometimes when you're trying to have like a normal conversation, he'll really be like, yeah, oh my god, I will seek my vengeance on the dominant. It's like, okay, buddy, we're just talking, buddy. You don't gotta be like that. After a generous prologue and some tragic twists, you set up shop in the middle of the world, sallying forth from a hub hideaway with crafting facilities and shops separating loading regions. So a big part of this game is you start out. Do they have a picture of the map? You start out very much in the center of this thing, and you keep going out to do your different missions to sort of figure out how to build up your base or save people or craft the next super weapon. That way you can go a little bit deeper into the overall plot. I actually think it's unique. A lot of Final Fantasy games are not linear, but they're very focused. Go to the next place, unlock the airship, fly over here and try and save this princess. I think a lot of Final Fantasy games are very dead set on a series of accidental victories. It's cool to me that Final Fantasy XVI does feel more focused on establishing Clive as the main character, at least in my opinion. I'm glad this guy is being very vague about the story itself, but I just disagree with his sentiment. This guy is trying to be very verbose and have a great vocabulary here in his explanation for the fact that they have already talked about the fact that the game is very inspired by Game of Thrones, for better or for worse. I mean, the story does have backstabbing and background misogyny and, things that definitely did exist in a medieval era, which is what they're trying to do. This is a story that's supposed to make us feel conflicted. Even as we're winning, we're supposed to feel conflicted, right? I kind of disagree with this guy. Man, coming out to a 6 out of 10 is just baffling. Even as long as this is, I'm glad he's showing a lot of the summons. Look at these dominants. Oh, man, they look cool as hell. Man, coming out to a 6 out of 10. Let me read his blurb at the end here, like all of his thoughts summed up. The contradiction speaks oddly self-canceling nature of the story as a whole. Again, Final Fantasy XVI is on some level a playable deconstruction of a traditional hero yarn. Its plot painstakingly explores how the urge to fight everyone's battles for them may disintegrate into an egotism and even callousness, bred of thinking the world is yours to save. But the game's insistence on playing out the hero fable regardless of this is like having your cake and eating it. Certainly, it doesn't take 50 hours to grasp this morale, and while Final Fantasy XVI is perhaps the state-of-the-art real-time Final Fantasy combat, its dreary side quests and slight excess of world building leave me reluctant to fire up that New Game Plus. Man, this guy kind of sounds like he hated it, to be quite honest with you. There are, of course, a lot more positive RPG reviews. Like this guy right here, this is Video Game Chronicle VGC says, Final Fantasy XVI is an incredible action game that doesn't quite deliver the RPG heritage. I want to just take a look at their blurb at the end, too. They gave it a very, very good score. Oh, look at that cute little Moogle. I love Moogles. If this video somehow gets 6,000 likes, I'm going to get a Moogle tattoo. I've been looking to get either a Moogle tattoo or a Chocobo tattoo right here, but we'll see. Let's just read this last 3 paragraphs real quick. The game's cast is a highlight, with Ben Starr, Susanna Fielding, and Ralph Ensign all being excellent, with Starr able to juggle the game's lighter and darker moments easily. Fans of The Office or any British advert for the last 10 years will perhaps find Sid's voice somewhat distracting at first, because he is a famous British actor, but will wager he'll find himself firmly among the heartthrobs of the Final Fantasy series. The music of Final Fantasy XVI is expectedly absolutely outstanding. I think this is done by Soken, the guy who's done a bunch of work for Final Fantasy XIV. The man literally wrote symphonies in his hospital bed. That actually happened. Soken is a man who has many talents. We felt like we were tuning on our TV. We felt like we were turning on our TV volume up every. We felt like we were turning up our TV volume every few nights, to the point that by the end of sessions, our walls were practically shaking. The boss themes are incredible, and the reimagined Final Fantasy Victory Flourish never fails to make us break into the widest grin. It's utterly an essential soundtrack. God, I'm so happy to hear that. Final Fantasy XVI is an incredible action game with blockbuster graphics and music, but there's a real sense that it's missing some of the series' original RPG identity. To play it as straightforward action game with little deviation is to have an amazing experience, but if any point you feel inclined to stop and smell the roses, you may be found wanting. Honestly, I think these reviews sound very positive. I think these reviews sound, for the most part, incredibly good. I'm going to have some sort of impression-style video up tomorrow. I'm not sure what I'm going to call it. Probably something like my thoughts on Final Fantasy after 20 hours. But I am about to leave town to go to Too Many Games up in Philadelphia. So if you're in Philadelphia and you want to see me in person, I'm going to be there this weekend. And then when I come back, I'm going to finish beating the game, and then I'll have some sort of video called, like, I Platinumed Final Fantasy XVI. Here's what I learned, and here's what I love. But I appreciate you guys watching this. Final Fantasy fans, it is a good time to be hyped. I'm very, very happy. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you could enjoy it, if you could like it and subscribe if you haven't already, and please keep dreaming. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.